So as I said, welcome to CHWC's Apprenticeship Industry Convening. Before we begin, I'll give a little background to those who are new to CHWC. The mission of the Chicagoland Healthcare Workforce Collaborative is to unite employers and industry partners to support an inclusive healthcare workforce, provide accessibility for unemployed and underemployed populations, and develop innovative responses to the evolving needs of the healthcare industry. We do this by focusing on three strategic pillars: local and targeted hiring, developing strong relationships with our education and training providers, and supporting retention and progressive career pathways. We are an employer-led table with 12 of Chicago's major health and hospital systems as members. And we're supported by more than a dozen strategic partners that include our public partners, training providers, and community organizations. Many of you are here today. Thanks for joining. So over the last few months, we've held a few different industry convenings where our employer partners got together and shared their unique program models and strategies related to workforce development, career awareness, and inclusive talent acquisition. At one of those events, we heard from Jerry Bach at Advocate Aurora, who I think is here with us. Thanks, Jerry. Jerry shared Advocate Aurora's registered apprenticeship models in the culinary arts and facility maintenance. I know they're also working on launching some other additional occupations right now. And when we opened up the floor for discussion during that event, some employers expressed an interest in expanding the use of the apprenticeship model, but they felt they needed more information and support in order to do that. I've heard from you all that the apprenticeship model can feel a little daunting and bureaucratic or difficult to understand. I've also heard about some specific challenges you might be facing, such as implementing apprenticeships in a unionized setting. And I've also heard that it would be beneficial for us to learn from successful models in other regions, because we don't have a very long history of implementing apprenticeships in healthcare in Chicago so far. So that's essentially why we're here today. And before I introduce the agenda and pass it on to our presenters, I'll just share a couple of stats with you. According to the US Department of Labor, 94% of apprentices who complete an apprenticeship program retain employment, and employers typically see a $1.47 return on investment for every dollar they spend on apprenticeship programs. Registered apprenticeships are expanding across the nation, and Illinois has made this a priority. So just recently, Governor Pritzker and the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity announced an $8 million investment in expanding apprenticeship programs through the funding of navigators and intermediary grantees. So we know there's a lot of opportunity here, but we need to learn more, and then we need to do the work and collaborate with each other to really take advantage. So I'm hoping we can start to do that today. In the first portion of this event, we'll learn more about what an apprenticeship is, how it has been used successfully in healthcare in other regions, and what supports exist to help employers and partners launch new programs. So first, we'll hear from Jake McClellan from the Healthcare Career Advancement Program, who will provide a high-level overview and talk about the services that his organization offers. And then we'll hear from Megan Konzelman, who is the program manager of talent development strategies at Samaritan Health Services in Oregon. And she'll share a bit about their experience launching a medical assistant apprenticeship and a new pharmacy tech apprenticeship. Then we'll shift gears and focus more locally and hear from Kindy Kruller, who is our economic development program manager at the Cook County Bureau of Economic Development and our local apprenticeship navigator. And then in the second half of this event, we'll briefly hear about 3 different existing or proposed programs that are currently utilizing the apprenticeship model in Chicagoland in healthcare. So Zhao Fen, Donald, and Sandra, the team at OAI, will share their certified nursing assistant apprenticeship program. And then Hector Gonzalez from Career Launch Chicago will share their new youth apprenticeships that they're launching with a few of our CHWC employers, including a pharmacy tech program. And then finally, Priscilla Bolander from SUHI will share a behavioral health apprenticeship model that she's currently working on. So it's a tight schedule, and we might not have a lot of time for open discussion, but as I mentioned, please utilize the chat and ask questions of our presenters. Also feel free to share other resources there. I hope that you'll be able to make connections here today that lead to deeper discussions so we can utilize the apprenticeship model better in Chicago. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Jake. Jake, you should have the capability to share your screen.
Great, thank you so much. Let me pull up my slides here. Okay, does that work for everybody? Awesome. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. As April mentioned, my name is Jake McClelland. I am a consultant. I do a lot of work around the country with different organizations around healthcare apprenticeship expansion, including for HCAP, the Healthcare Advancement Program, as April mentioned. So I'll get a little bit more into what we can do for this group down the road. But before we got started, I just wanted to share a little bit about my background. I've actually been in workforce development for over 20 years. I've done a lot of different things before I became a consultant around apprenticeship. I was actually the director of a local workforce development board. So I worked in the public workforce system for a number of years. And I was actually in Oregon, and we helped launch the program while I was there that Megan's going to talk about in a little bit. So Megan and Samaritan were one of our bigger employer partners, and it's been a great model for them and a number of the different clinics in Oregon that we worked with. And so about 3 years ago, my family and I, we ended up moving back to Las Vegas. And as I mentioned, I just started kind of consulting, and I've talked to a number of groups around the country through HCAP and elsewhere. I've talked with organizations specifically about medical assistant apprenticeships, pharmacy tech, different kinds of behavioral health apprenticeships, and things like that in not only Oregon, but California, Texas. Just helped launch a program for medical assistants in North Carolina last month. And so glad to be here and share any expertise that I can. So I know this will probably be a review for many of you. I think that you kind of understand the basics of apprenticeship at this point, but I figure it never hurts to just kind of do a refresher. So apprenticeship is basically a training model at its core that combines paid on-the-job training, or OJT, with related technical instruction, RTI, or the classroom part that focuses on the theoretical and the technical aspects of the job. And so typically the OJT and the RTI are completed at the same time. So the difference between an apprenticeship and like an internship or any other kind of clinical program is that the apprentices are actually hired by the organization as an employee. They start off at a lower rate, wage rate to reflect the fact that they are sort of beginning and you know, still learning their skills. And then as they reach certain milestones, they're eligible for pay increases. And then they complete their educational or didactic component at the same time. And so by the time someone's done, they will not only have learned on the job, but they'll be eligible typically for you know, any kind of certification or credential that the occupation may require. If you've heard of apprenticeship at all, it's probably through like the construction trades, electricians, plumbers, carpenters, etc. They've been using the apprenticeship model for literally decades with much success. And then probably in the last, you know, decade or so, maybe 10 years, maybe a little more, you've started to see really that expansion into healthcare, IT, and these other sectors. And the reason for that is very simple. I think, you know, the Federal Department of Labor and other workforce development experts kind of see apprenticeship as the gold standard for training individuals, just because it does have many of the benefits that we'll talk about here in a minute. So just to get a little bit more detailed into the actual components, as I mentioned, the primary component is that on-the-job training, or OJT. So this is completed primarily, if not exclusively, at the employer site through hands-on experiential learning, basically observing, learning from mentors who are already at the job site. I say primarily because there are different models, especially if you have a model where you have multiple employers involved, where if a certain employer doesn't do something at their site, there's ways that you can kind of do around it. You can do it in a lab setting, you could do it at a school or something like that. But pretty much for the most part, that hands-on learning is going to be done at the employer site. During that time, the apprentices work toward mastering competencies and the skills that are identified by the employer or the employers, if it's a multi-employer group. So these are spelled out in the beginning of the program. It's basically a kind of a custom-made program, so each employer can do things a little bit differently if they want to. It's really meant to be tailored to an employer's specific needs. The apprentices are also, as I mentioned, employees of the clinical site, and then they are paid according to that progressive wage scale where, as I mentioned, they start off typically making a little bit less than your seasoned employee. And then as they increase their skills and as they learn more and reach certain milestones, they'll get that pay increase. The second part is going to be the related technical instruction part. As I mentioned, you can also call this the classroom or the didactic part. In a registered apprenticeship program, it's going to be a minimum of 144 hours of training that is involved. That is actually a very flexible 144 hours though. So it doesn't necessarily mean 144 hours of seat time in a classroom. There's many different ways you could do it. For example, the program I'm working on in North Carolina, 5 of those hours are actually their orientation that they do for new employees, that first day on the job. So there's that. If you require CPR certification, that could be counted for the RTI. So it's 144 hours, but it doesn't necessarily have to all be done in a classroom setting. The option for the types of education partners that you can use are very, very flexible in an apprenticeship model. That's one of the appeals to employers that I've found. So you can do it with a local community college or a training provider. You can use online tools, which is what we did with our program in Oregon that Megan's going to talk about. The program sponsor can actually do that instruction internally if they want to. There's a lot of different ways that you could do it. And like I said, it's meant to be really flexible so that any employer that's interested in starting an apprenticeship program can do it, even if they don't have even a community college or other partners in their area. And then again, typically the tuition and other costs are covered on behalf of the apprentice. So not always, but I think probably for the more successful models we see out there, the tuition and the other costs are going to be covered. Right now, there's quite a bit of grant funding available out there. As was mentioned at the beginning, the state of Illinois, it looks like, has put a lot of money into apprenticeship. The Department of Labor, the federal Department of Labor, puts out grants. It seems like every 3 or 4 months, there's a new one for expanding apprenticeship. And so usually the programs that I work with will have either grant funding covering it, or the employer will pay on behalf of the apprentice, depending on how it's set up. And then last but not least, typically a program does lead to some kind of certification or credential. The idea is that it's going to be an industry recognized credential. It's going to make that portable. It makes the apprentice basically qualified for work anywhere where that occupation is being utilized. And the whole idea of utilizing a registered apprenticeship is to sort of standardize what they're learning and validate from an employer's perspective that this person has learned those skills and is now a fully qualified worker. And then the types of credentials, again, could vary. This is one of the things I sometimes hear misconceptions about apprenticeship, is that it can only be for certain types of training programs, but you can absolutely build an apprenticeship program around a degree, around a certification, a licensure, any kind of certificate you can think of, you can build an apprenticeship around. So who are the potential apprentices? For the programs that I've worked with, I think there's really 3 kind of large buckets of candidates that we see. And then depending on where the employer is at in the process and also what the labor market might look like, any one of these 3 could be sort of the preferred method for that employer. So the first one is just current staff in the role. We see this a lot with employers who are maybe just starting the program. If they, again, particularly if they work in an area where there's not an abundance of certified workers already. You'll see employers will sometimes have to hire people that while they're not certified and then figure out ways to certify them. And this is a great model for doing that. So a lot of the programs I work with, they may have folks that have been hired as, for instance, a medical assistant 3 months ago, and they're kind of learning informally through an apprenticeship, but then you register the program. It just is a way of creating a more structured path for getting that uncredentialed worker to be certified. The nice thing about doing it that way is, of course, the workers can receive prior credit or credit for prior experience. And then typically you see them complete the program at a little bit more accelerated pace, because not only do they have less hours or less things that they need to learn, but because they've been doing that role for a while, they're a little bit more comfortable and familiar with it, and they just are able to move a little bit faster through the program. And then, of course, if you do it that way, there's no additional wage cost because you're not hiring an employee. You already have that person on payroll, so it's a little bit easier to get started that way. The second that we also see pretty frequently are any internal candidates for upskilling that you may have. So this could include non-clinical staff that are moving into a clinical role, could include people who are in the scheduling that are moving into like an MA role or something like that. But what this does is it creates that pathway for upward mobility for workers who have shown potential in their current roles and really have shown that they can move on to something even higher. And it's nice because that not only goes to the retention piece that we talked about earlier, but it's a way to sort of use that role for an employee to do almost like a working interview for 3 months. So one of the models that we see often is what we call the upskill and backfill, where you may have an employer take somebody that's at the front desk, move them into a clinical MA role through the apprenticeship, backfill that role with somebody, and then with the idea that eventually they're going to take that person that they're backfilling and move them into a clinical role as well. So it kind of creates this constant pool of candidates. And if you're, you have an employee that doesn't work out and an apprentice that doesn't work out, you have someone that's ready to go kind of in their place. And again, it gives you that 3, sometimes 6-month period to really gauge whether that person shows up on time, has good customer service, things like that. And then the last one we see, which is especially, it seems to be increasing lately with just, the way that the labor market is right now around the country and just shortages and a tight labor market, is the external hires. So a lot of employers do use apprenticeship as a way to expand the pool of individuals that they can recruit from. This is really nice, particularly for those that don't have the ability for whatever reason, whether it's money, whether it's they can't drop out of their current job or drop out of the workforce to attend a traditional education program. It really opens up opportunities for them. So the group that I mentioned earlier in North Carolina that just started their MA program in September, I was talking with them a few weeks ago, and they are actually now recruiting for a second cohort in January, and they started the posting a couple weeks ago, and they've already received, I think, 50 or 60 applicants, where in the past, when they had limited it to only certified staff or graduates of a education program, they, struggled to find enough people to even interview. And it was just sort of, you're constantly competing with other clinics in the area, where with the way they did it now, it just really increased the number of people that they were able to get applied. And they were actually very happy with the quality as well. I think that was the other thing they were kind of surprised about. They said of the 50 or 60 that applied, 30 to 40 were really, great candidates. And then they were only going to be able to hire 10 to 15, and they were trying to figure out a way like to keep those people like on a list somewhere for the next time that they're looking. But so the other thing with the external hires that's nice is that it just increases the total number of skilled workers in an area in general. So even if you're an employer in that region and another group or another employer starts an apprenticeship program, you kind of benefit in like a trickle down way, because it just increases the total number of workers in that region. And then last but not least, hiring that way also is a great fit for any initiatives that an employer may have around equity and inclusion, because typically you do see those individuals who are from underrepresented populations are the ones that aren't able to necessarily afford tuition or be able to complete that traditional program. So some of the common occupations you see around the country, certainly this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but medical assistant does seem to be a pretty popular one. I've seen a lot of certified nurse assistant as part of my work with HCAP. A lot of my colleagues are working on CNA programs with different facilities around the country. Pharmacy tech, I know, is another one that's interest there. I have had a couple conversations with Stephanie at Career Launch, and I know that she's working on a potential model with some of the folks on the call today. I know also Megan, when she talks, will hopefully talk a little bit about their efforts to try to now get a pharmacy tech program going. Dental assistant is one that I've seen a couple of recently. There's one that I'm familiar with in Washington State, and then a couple different ones in California actually now that are looking at dental assistant. Patient care tech, again, depending on the type of facility that you are and how the different roles shake out. This is one that in Texas, the hospitals are looking to launch a patient care tech program, including a group that I was just on a call with earlier today, hoping to start in, in January with their community college. Medical billing and coding, that's another one that's been around for quite a while. I know there are programs out there. A more recent one is going to be a nurse residency. So there are folks now who are taking their nurse residency programs and turning that into a registered apprenticeship, just as a way of, again, bringing in new workers, increasing the quality of the training that the folks are getting during that time, and just, being able to access the other benefits. The other ones I didn't really have room to put on here, but EMT is another one that could be a fit if folks are interested. And then, like I mentioned, probably in the last 6 months or so, I've fielded a number of inquiries and helped some different employers look at different kinds of behavioral health apprenticeship programs. Everything from a certified alcohol and drug counselor to actual licensed clinicians. I have a meeting tomorrow with a group in Florida that is looking to do that, which I'm actually kind of interested to hear more about. But yeah, so really any occupation you can think of, if there's a training aspect involved, you can turn it into an apprenticeship if you're willing to kind of do the things that it takes to do so. Oops. So why apprenticeship from an employer's perspective? I think I touched on a number of these already, but really it's growing your talent pool by expanding opportunities to those that haven't been able to take that traditional pathway into jobs before. So it just opens up new people to apply for openings. That allows organizations to create, like I mentioned, those internal career pathways for current workers, which really helps with the retention piece. And there's really no stopping, where it could go. You could take somebody from a front desk position or whatever, put them into an MA role, and then, maybe the next step is LPN, which I know is another one that's being talked about there, or moving them into an RN or getting them into a nursing program. So there's really, the possibilities are kind of limitless. The other thing is that it allows the employers to really determine and prioritize the skills that are being learned by the apprentices. One thing I have heard from employer partners that I've worked with in the past is that they actually like hiring from the apprenticeship, in some cases more than hiring from a community college or another program, because they feel like sometimes they have to unlearn the people on things that maybe they learned in the classroom setting that might apply in a general sense, but isn't exactly the way that they do it at their clinics. So they really like just the ability to be able to teach people specifically the things that they want them to learn and using their systems and all that stuff. Apprenticeship models have been shown to increase worker satisfaction, which I know we alluded to at the beginning, and then that leads to higher retention rates. That also leads to typically better customer service, better patient care, and all those good things. And then last but not least, as I mentioned, the public investment in registered apprenticeship programs over the last several years has just really been significant. And that spans multiple, presidential administrations going back, at least as far as I can remember, under Obama, President Trump, there was funding available. And then now even under President Biden, as I mentioned, there's grants that are available. So it seems to be one of those sort of bipartisan issues that, both parties seem to really be supportive of the registered apprenticeship model. So I don't see that investment going away anytime soon. So just a real quick about HCAP and some of the things that we can do for you. So HCAP, as I mentioned, is a U.S. Department of Labor national industry partner. They've been doing this for a number of different years. They were one of the original, at least as far as I could recall, organizations that got into healthcare apprenticeship. Even when it was just kind of in its infancy, I remember hearing about HCAP. And so we have a contract with the U.S. Department of Labor to provide services to any organization or state apprenticeship agency that wants to expand into either healthcare or behavioral health. And then recently, we also added early childhood learning to the list of occupations we can help with. So just some of the things that we can provide. And again, these are all no cost services to the employer or to the stakeholder that's interested. We provide technical assistance to help develop your registered apprenticeship program. We have a whole library of different apprenticeship standards on our website that anyone can go and access and borrow, steal, whatever you want to do, copy, so you don't have to create programs from scratch. We help organizations when it comes to getting their program registered with either the U.S. DOL Office of Apprenticeship or state apprenticeship agency, depending on what state that they're in. We help them develop the on-the-job learning competencies for each occupation. As I mentioned, we have examples on our website that individuals can take, and they can also take and customize if they need to. We help employers, find different secondary and post-secondary educational partners that they can use for the related technical instruction, or work directly with those partners to develop programs. We also work very closely with the local workforce system to assist, finding additional funding. As I mentioned, I'm very familiar with that system, having done that most of my career. So anytime I work with a new program, if they are not already working with the workforce board, I try to get them connected, because a lot of the funding that you see coming out in grants is typically used to help with the startup of a program. But for more ongoing or sustainable support, you're going to want to link up with your workforce board or your local workforce system, because that's funding that comes out every year. And also programs that are registered apprenticeships are typically able to get funding and be eligible training providers through the workforce system. We also can help work on strategies to recruit and retain workforce, including diversity. Last month, a couple of my colleagues at HCAP did a webinar on hiring persons with disabilities and how the apprenticeship model can help with that. So any kind of strategies to really recruit and look for your workforce, we can help with. And then last, we also do have some incentive funding, again, through Department of Labor contract to help launch your program. So it's not a huge pot of money, and that's why we do also try to help folks find the funding that they can leverage. But it is a little bit of a help if that's sort of the last thing that you the last hurdle that you need to overcome to be able to get the program off the ground. HCAP does have funding that they are able to provide to employer partners. So I think that's it for the slides. I don't know, do you want to save questions for the end, or I know?
Thank you, Jake. Yes. First of all, thank you for that. That was very informative. I think we're all lucky to have Jake here because he does know so much about all these different program models across the nation. I think I want to move directly on to Megan and hear about that program model in Oregon, and then we'll open the floor for questions for both of you. And everyone who's on the call, feel free to drop some questions in the chat in the meantime. So Megan, I believe I gave you also, yep, there you go. Take it away.
All right, just give me a moment here. All right, I think we are all set. Everyone see the screen? Great. All right, well, thank you. Some of this information, just a disclaimer, maybe reiterating a bit of what Jake stated, just kind of generalized information about apprenticeship, but I'll definitely speak about specifically what we're doing within Samaritan Health Services and how beneficial this program has been overall to helping resolve some hiring needs that we were seeing, and simultaneously being a pathway to upskill incumbent workers within our organization. So we were noticing that there was a workforce shortage, workforce need, not only in our organization, but in healthcare in general, and filling certified medical assistant positions. And with the limited number of traditional programs in Oregon and community college level, we just weren't able to fill those positions at the rate that we needed to. And at that point, it brought us to conversation with some of our workforce partners, including Jake, about what can be done as a creative means to solve that problem. And we were provided with this information on developing a medical assistant apprenticeship program. So Samaritan Health Services is a healthcare partner in Oregon that consists of 5 hospitals. We cover 3 counties. We have about 100 clinics and employ about 6,000 people. So many of those roles are clinical, many of them are non-clinical. It's the entire patient coverage base, and some of those positions are for certified medical assistants. And so I will talk a little bit about what that program entails. So as Jake mentioned, an apprenticeship program is a combination of paid on-the-job training and online classroom learning. We're of course seeing that transition much more to online now, and mentorship. And that mentorship component comes from the on-the-job training component when they're working, that apprentice is working directly with their preceptor on the job, learning the skills and trades. And utilize the earn and learn training model. So to help eliminate those barriers to training and education that some people encounter, you know, it's challenging when you're thinking about advancing in your career or education. And do you leave your current occupation, pursue a traditional program, accrue student loans, then come out of that program, try to obtain a job? Whereas the apprenticeship model eliminates the struggles associated with that pathway, and you're immediately provided a position within the organization where you can earn and learn day one and progress through the program at your own pace, and are provided the support, and the organization and the workforce partners collaboratively cover the costs of that program. So who is eligible to participate in this program? To become an apprentice, individual must be 18 years or older, have a high school diploma or equivalent. And they can be internal with Samaritan, they can be external applicants, but we highly encourage internal incumbent applicants to apply, because that ties in very nicely into our workforce development initiatives that we have internally. The majority of our applicants have been internal, and at this point, we've had about 24 medical assistant apprenticeships participate in the program. So program specifics, it's about 2,000 hours long, which takes approximately 1 year to complete. It can take more or less if individuals have breaks in that time. There's 156 hours of related training in this specific program that they complete online at their own pace. And they may be given work experience credit for up to 1,000 hours. For example, if they have been working in a medical assistant capacity but are not yet a certified clinical medical assistant, that can be applicable towards 1,000 hours. And then they are hired and benefited as full-time employees throughout their apprenticeship. And so if you're looking at this from an employer perspective, that is something that you would need to account for from a budget perspective, is covering that apprentice, that benefits and wages component. Whereas the related training, cost of online training materials and the CCMA exam, et cetera, that is covered currently through the local workforce boards and our workforce development partners. So on a grant basis, and Jake was mentioning, there's some grant funding available for that. That is always an option to pursue if it's not something that your organization is able to cover independently. So program qualifications, it will vary state by state, but in the state of Oregon, our program is registered with the Apprenticeship Training Division and approved by BOLI, the Bureau of Labor and Industries. So they are a pivotal partner in getting this program registered and approved. And then there are a variety of different requirements in that approval and registration process, which includes participation or creating a joint apprenticeship training committee, which is a JTC, and developments of standards and policies, record keeping, tracking, reporting, et cetera. There's really quite a lot of information that needs to be followed, but Jake's been a great guide in being able to navigate all of that, and as well as our workforce partners. So becoming a CCMA, so at the conclusion of the program, apprentices completing this are able to take the National Healthcare Association, which is the NHA certification exam. Then on completion of that exam, they would be a certified clinical medical assistant and can move into a position that we have available. And just a fun fact of this program, 100% passing rate on the CCMA exam. So it's a very high rate of retention, and we're very pleased with the quality of learning in the program, and the candidates that have come out of the program have been really exceptional. And so we've had excellent feedback from everyone participating in the program, from an apprentice perspective, from a preceptor's perspective, and from a clinic manager's perspective. The benefits to us as an employer, I mentioned a little bit earlier, we were attempting to fulfill a workforce need that we were being challenged with. And so not only does this provide that stable pipeline of employees, but it's also, and a strategy to address these workforce shortages, but it's also a pathway for individuals within our organization to upskill and move into other roles that may, provide them with a higher wage position, more of a living wage. We see a lot of our medical assistant apprentices coming from those front office positions, where they're maybe already working in a clinic capacity, in a reception position, in a front office position, and they're really interested in pursuing a clinical role. And so that transition and support across the organization of taking those high performing individuals who are interested in pursuing something different, that also fulfills a workforce need for us, and moving them into those medical assistant apprenticeship programs is a pathway that we most definitely utilize. The benefits for apprentices in this program, they receive competitive pay and benefits, and it removes those financial barriers to education, since we're covering the cost of the related training and the certification and everything that it would entail for them to become a certified medical assistant. There's no need to relocate for educational or training opportunities. It happens right where they currently work and live. It's overseen by professionals in the field, so they're getting that one-on-one attention by medical assistants, by physicians, by nurses they work alongside in, and really becoming part of that crucial patient care team. There's a high level of mentorship and support. So again, versus a traditional classroom setting where you may be one of the masses, you're really getting that one-on-one personalized mentorship opportunity and training. And then the training and certification exam fees are covered as well. So just our main goal really in providing this program to individuals within our organization and externally is to help eliminate those barriers to education and help find a solution for us simultaneously. So mine was short and sweet. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Megan. I know it's always beneficial for us to hear about models that are working well elsewhere. So now, yes, let's open the floor to questions for either Jake or Megan. And feel free to just turn on your mic and ask, or drop something in the chat.
This is Kathleen Brannigan. I'm with the Chicago Cook Workforce Partnership here in Chicago. Nice to have you both with us on the line, and thank you for your presentations. I work with the public workforce system here for Cook County. And we too have been engaged in different work-based learning projects, training projects. So I essentially am the representative that brings those public WIOA dollars to the table, so that's my scope. The question I have, we do have a medical assistant pathway project that we're actually in our third cohort with Chicago City Colleges. And I've worked on the project since it has started. The question I have for you, Megan and or Jake, is in our particular program, and I do think my partner who worked on it, Stephanie Gomez, is on the webinar as well. What we encountered, and it was done through incumbent worker training dollars. So it was workers that were you know, with respective large hospital systems, many of their workers really had, we had a big learning curve with their math and English skill levels. And I just wondered, Megan, if that was something that you two had experienced, because as we moved along from cohort 1 to cohort 2, they had to do a lot of bridge training, you know, to really bring interested participants up to the level where they could actually, I'm lacking for the word there, but, you know, bring up their literacy level so that they could be efficient in their studies, you know, in math and in English. And I wondered if you had experienced that as well.
From my perspective, that we haven't directly experienced that as of yet. And there is, to just shed some light on the application process for the medical assistant apprenticeship program, there is a pre-application that is processed before the individual actually applies for the role that we have posted for employment. So in that pre-application process, they do need to demonstrate that they have covered baseline skills, et cetera, that are required of the position in order to be successful in the role. And everyone who has been able to pass that pre-application process has been successful in pursuing the apprenticeship model. However, I know there are resources available locally for people who maybe need some extra assistance in upskilling in certain areas that are pre-apprenticeship programs. So there are pre-apprenticeship programs through local workforce boards that we're aware of if an individual needs help with maybe enhancing their medical terminology skills or ESL skills or anything that you're seeing as like a need within your organization. That may be something that's already available in your area or could be available with some of the funding sources out there.
Yeah, there were different things obviously available in Chicago City colleges that were built in. I just wondered if you're, you know, in your particular region, if that was something. My question was more related to the actual workers and their skill level, if that was something that you had also experienced.
We haven't experienced that, but the applicants that we have had in the program have really, I think the quality of education, having that mentorship experience, they've turned out to be excellent certified medical assistants. So overall, we're very pleased with the program. In comparison to a traditional route, we see a much higher quality of candidate come through the apprenticeship program in comparison to a traditional education route.
Why do you think that is, Megan?
You know, it's interesting. We're doing actually a little bit of data collection on that right now with our workforce development coordinator who just joined our team to kind of dig into that more. We've interviewed, you know, the managers and preceptors and participants in the program. But so we have some assumptions that we're looking into seeing what the accuracy of that is. But I do think it's a component of this is a different structured model versus the traditional route. You really have that one-on-one mentorship. You are learning those hands-on skills day one. You are getting to practice them. You are being guided by a skilled mentor in practicing those. There's very, very little room for error, I think, and there's a high level of opportunity to ask questions and clarify. A lot of skill building that happens right off the bat. And then just the level of that related learning content has been very high, well received. And I think also, I mean, it's interesting. I wonder, like socioeconomically, I wonder if the factor of eliminating those financial barriers and logistical barriers to education and pursuing something in addition to, you know, pursuing one's goals educationally, personally, and professionally, by eliminating some of those barriers, if that is also some kind of factor. So we don't have direct answers on that, but we have assumptions because there's a lot of wraparound support in making this person successful in what they want to do.
Thank you, Megan.
Yeah, I would just add too, some of the other employers that I've talked to as well, you know, they have added additional components to the application process, kind of like Megan pointed out. But for instance, there's a group that now requires the applicants to write sort of like an essay, like a 1 or 2 page essay, to sort of outline what their career goals are and things like that. And because it's such a beneficial program for the person, because they're getting paid and going to school at the same time, basically for free, it's, you know, a little bit even more than just a job. So there's sometimes you can expect more from people, for lack of a better word. So I think, you know, being able to incorporate those sorts of things, and I haven't seen this personally, but I know, at least in healthcare, but I know like some of the apprenticeship programs, like in manufacturing, now are looking at utilizing sort of like basic skill assessments. So basic reading, basic math tests. So that's another thing that you could look to incorporate it, you know, making sure that even the internal candidates, you know, have the baseline skills that they need in order to be successful in the program. So yeah, just a couple of other, you know, ways that you can do a little bit of vetting of individuals as well.
Hi, Megan. This is Mary Schmidt with Midwestern Career College. And first of all, thank you for this presentation. And Jake, thank you for yours as well. It's very informative today. My question comes from the academic side. Have you seen an impact on your local community college partners by introducing this program? The reason that I ask that is we do see something very similar in the dialysis technology world, where, you know, rather than going through a formal training program, very often individuals are hired at, maybe they have a CNA, and then they'll train them on the job over a period of 8 weeks. What that's done though is it's certainly helped them with their pipeline, but it's rather decimated organizations that had dialysis programs, and we've seen them across the country shut down one by one, the formal training programs. In discussions with our large clinical partners like Fresenius and DaVita, they've actually said the opposite in terms of the candidate quality. So this is very interesting. The results that you're seeing is that they prefer people to go through a formal training program, and that they find that the employee retention is higher through the formal training program, as well as the caliber of the individual. So they're seeing, now that's dialysis, not medical assisting, but the roles in terms of qualifications can be very similar. So I'm very interested by your findings, and I'm just wondering if you know about that academic side.
Absolutely. So we do have many close connections and partnerships with local community colleges and universities in the area. Our hospital system provides approximately 2,000 clinical experiences to students all over the state, in all of our different hospitals and clinics every year. So we do have a very close relationship with educational partners providing those clinical experiences, and then we do often hire many of those students on the outcome of their programs. So that being said, it's very important for us to maintain very positive relations with those community college partners that we do still serve their medical assistant students for their clinical rotations and practicum experiences. And so we were very transparent in having conversations with them about, we have this workforce need, we value your partnership. However, the community college pool alone is not enough to fulfill our workforce need. And they were very understanding and receptive to that. And I can proudly say that it has not impacted their clinical experiences whatsoever. We place so many students across our system every year, and it hasn't impacted our ability to place medical assistant students and still hire so many of them. This has just been an additional route and pathway to help fill our workforce need. So that, I hope, answered that first question for you. I think just working with those partners in a transparent way initially to let them know that you are building this program, you know, your priority is to support your organization, but to still maintain those positive relationships with those community partners. It's very possible to do both. And then I can just personally say we have not decreased our placements statistically, just looking over the years. Before we had an apprenticeship program, after we had an apprenticeship program, we're still maintaining the same number of clinical placements for those roles. And then what was your second question?
Really just the impact on enrollment, if you're aware, is primary and secondarily, like I say, from the dialysis perspective, we're hearing from our clinical partners the opposite in terms of candidate caliber. And I'm glad that's not the case for you, but the result has been, and again, dialysis is a very different world in that in the Chicagoland area, we have two primary providers of renal care services. There are some independents, but primarily it's Fresenius and DaVita. Since both have adopted that model of hiring direct and training over an 8-week period, we've seen, like I say, across the country, one by one dialysis programs shutting down. So it is different than medical assisting, but that would certainly be, a concern that as an institution that has two medical assisting programs that we would have.
Sure.
Yeah, I can maybe speak a little bit to that as well. So I can tell you, there was certainly some very tense conversations that we had with our local community college when we started the program. We had actually started out initially intending to partner with them as a related instruction provider, and then for whatever reason it didn't work. They had a 2-year associate's degree program, and we couldn't quite make it match what the employers were looking for. And so at the time, as I mentioned, I was actually with the workforce board, and my board vice chair was the president of the community college. So it was definitely a fun time. But anyway, I think, Megan hit on the head there. For a lot of these occupations, especially like MA and things like that, there's such a need that the college couldn't keep up. So, we weren't, they kind of saw us as competition in the beginning. And then I think they realized, oh, we're still getting our people enrolled. I do think there obviously is the potential for that to happen, particularly in some of the smaller occupations like a dialysis tech, or, at one point, I know in Oregon, we've looked at starting a surgical tech program where you maybe don't need that many per year. So we have community colleges that are saying, well, why would we start a program if you're just gonna do an apprenticeship? So I do think those are definitely conversations that have to be had between the employer partners and the community college system. But I will say, like I said, especially for an occupation like MA or those really high volume ones, there's usually more than enough demand and need to sustain both programs. And frankly, most of the employers I've talked to, if they had their choice and they said, hey, we can open up a job and we can have all certified applicants come and apply, they're going to just do that. Why would they hire somebody, beforehand and train them themselves if they don't have to? But yeah, usually there's some kind of either mismatch or just not quite the community college system or the post-secondary system alone isn't able to address the demand.
And Jake, there definitely is demand on the provider side. There's no question that there are more open positions than we can produce students. But the dilemma comes in terms of that potential applicant looking in the two directions. I can go in an apprenticeship route, or I can go to a formal training program. It's an unusual student probably who's going to say, well, I want to pay to go to a formal training program. So the applicant pool dries up.
I think this is a great conversation, but I do have to push us to move along. Thank you, Mary, for bringing that up. I do think it's also a valid point that we need so many more MAs than our system is capable of training at this moment. So I welcome, all new programs to start. We definitely have to move along. I apologize. It's my fault that I've made too tight of an agenda here today. But I want to hear from Kindy very quickly, who is our local apprenticeship navigator, to talk a little bit about what supports she can offer and what it looks like to set up an apprenticeship specifically in Illinois and in Cook County, so that we can hear from the examples of programs that we currently have in Chicagoland. So go ahead, Kindy.
Great. Thanks, April. Thanks, Jake and Megan. My name is Kindy Kruller. I work at the Bureau of Economic Development for Cook County, and we manage a grant from the state as an apprenticeship navigator. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about it. Jake and Megan did an excellent job of giving you really the nuts and bolts about apprenticeship, but I think it might be helpful to have some wonderful local resources. So it is a state program. I'm focused here on EDR4. So even though I work at the Cook County Bureau of Economic Development, I am focused on the Northeastern Illinois region, the 10 counties. So we're really focusing on creating talent solutions for employers as a concierge, meeting them where they're at. Some employers I work with just want the name of a local DOL rep, and some others just want to understand what it means to start an apprenticeship and evaluate if it's good for them. So I can do any and all of those conversations. So if you're an employer and considering an apprenticeship, I'm happy to talk to you. And it's great to see so many other resources on the phone today. We see just so many potential benefits for employers. We've heard from Megan and kind of her perspective as an employer. But I think the ones that we see the most of value in this current labor market is this reduction of turnover, and that cost is extraordinary to employers. To that end, on a manufacturing study, we saw $1.47 being returned for every dollar invested. And I know I'm going through this quickly, but much of this was covered, but we're also just seeing apprenticeships evolve and grow as a talent solution for a variety of sectors, including healthcare. So in terms of the approval process, there's a quick start guide. I just wanted to walk you through that really quickly to start, if you are an employer and starting to think about what this could look like from your perspective. And I know you're going to hear from some excellent folks in just a moment, but you really want to explore, partner, build, register your apprenticeship, and launch. And this exploratory moment is really important. You have a great sector partnership here with all of your the healthcare providers, and thinking through those occupations and who could be a great partner. I know Malcolm X College has been a good partner, and there's other providers as well. And the building your apprenticeship is, as Jake talked about, thinking about what components will be in your instruction, what your time frame will be for your occupation and the on-the-job training, and what the time frame is to register this. So I kind of just synthesized these a little bit more into real talk. And so that occupation, you can look at apprenticeship.gov, and your training providers are really those first key decisions that you need to make. If you will need a funding assistance, there's both tax incentives as well as subsidized funding from either your workforce board. Here in Illinois, we have ETIP, JTED was also just announced. And the next critical step, once you have your funding, education provider, and occupation set, is the paperwork, and that's a Form 671. And it's really just an intake form that once you have that form complete, we can make an introduction to our local DOL reps here that are focused on Illinois, and they have been really great to work with. I think it's really critical to find the right person, and I feel fortunate to have been at it long enough that I have found the right people. And then finalizing the paperwork to get your approval from DOL. We see it being about 6 to 12 months. Again, Advocate Aurora Hospital has been a team I've been working with for the last year, and they'll share hopefully some of their stories today. And these are two of the key critical resources, apprenticeshipillinois.com and apprenticeship.gov. And I'll leave it there, April, pardon me.
Thanks so much for that, Kindy, and thanks for keeping it short. I appreciate
it. Yep.
Okay, so right now we're going to move on and hear from some of the program models that are in place in Chicago. We have 3. So first we'll hear from OAI, and then we'll hear from Career Launch Chicago, and then finally from Priscilla at SUHI. So I encourage you all just to give a very brief overview. I hope that anyone who's on this call and is interested in following up to learn more about any of these programs or to become employer partners, you can reach out to me. I'm very happy to set up those connections or directly to the folks who are on the call. So I'll turn it over to OAI.
April, can I share my screen?
I gave you permission to.
All right.
There you go.
Hi, my name is Don Brozek. I'm with OAI and I am the program manager for our registered program. We have several. The one in healthcare is for an advanced CNA program. I'll try to keep this as short as possible because people already have given an overview of how an apprenticeship works. So I'll talk more about us. We are a well-established Chicago-based workforce development organization that attempts to put, we're nonprofit that attempts to put underserved populations into training and support them so that they can enter into middle skilled career pathways and lives. You can see the names of the people who are involved in the program there. Molly is our executive director and the rest of our crew. Next slide. Okay. And over the recent past, we've gotten support from all of these governmental and private foundation organizations that you see on the screen here. Next. The important thing that we offer is that we find training appropriate to the employment that the employer and the participant needs through organizations regulated and training programs like community colleges and other institutions that are both licensed and regulated. But we provide supportive services before participants enter the program and while they're employed with you. Personal supports, you can see all of this retention once they are working for you, so that the success rate has been extraordinary. We have a long history of pre-apprenticeship programs, and this registered apprenticeship program that we've recently started with as an intermediary for the state of Illinois, working with Kindy as our local navigator, has built upon that. Next, that our certified nursing assistant program, you'll get a copy of this. Next. The benefits to the employer, and there are many, as has been mentioned by the other speakers. You get well-trained, motivated people. When they show up at your door, they are certified CNAs. We make sure that they get all the training that any CNA would get, and they take the state exam, so they are ready to go. Another part of the registered apprenticeship program that we've created is that they get a specialty certification after they start working with you. So they off, some in the evening, but off work hours, they would be taking these classes to get their specialty certification, whether it be in memory care or what you feel that would be most beneficial to you. There's the potential for on-the-job training fund, which is 50% of their wages from the first 3 to 6 months. And as I listened to the prior speakers, I guess I would characterize our program as a hybrid. You don't have to go through the DOL process, registration process. We've already done that. We are the sponsor and the creator. Next screen, please. So you don't have to do that. And I know that red tape has been a difficult thing for some organizations to get through and determine whether it's worth the effort. So we've already done that. The way that our sponsorship works is that for each employer, they can kind of change around some of the aspects of the RA designation, the way that it works, whether it be what that specialty is, what the pay scales are, when the reviews come on whether the person has met the skill requirements, the competency levels that you see here, even the shifts. So if you work with us, then what it basically boils down to for you is that you would decide on the graduated pay scale that is a requirement of the registered apprenticeship program. They start at one level and work their way through the competency-based apprenticeship program to another, and provide mentorship and periodic reviews that OAI with OAI and the employee. And that's nearly the extent of it. There would be a little bit of paperwork involved that we would help you with, but that's basically it. As April mentioned and others mentioned, the people that we work with are very motivated from the beginning, and we do provide much in the way of supports. We have a system that for success before, during, and after employment with you. We usually work with new employees, but there is the opportunity. There are programs for incumbent workers also. If you have someone who's working in another position, they can participate in our advanced CNA program. I'll hand it off to Zalfan to talk about some additional details.
All right. Yeah, I'll just introduce our entire program process briefly. So OAI would be responsible for the recruitment. At first, we will post our related program info on social media and everywhere. Then we decide whether participant is suitable for our program. So that's called tryout. In that process, we will check on their eligibility. We will ask them to take a tape test to make sure they have sufficient math and reading skills to go through the entire trainings. Sometimes we will even talk with the employers. There might be employers who would like to meet the candidates at the very, very early stage to make sure they have certain qualities they're looking for. So after that tryout period, all the suitable and eligible participants would start their bootcamp foundational skills workshop. In that workshop, some of the soft skills content would be covered, such as meeting with the OAI staff, discussing their expectations for the program, create their own career interest inventory, participate in some essential skills workshop, and create their resume so that they can move forward after they finish the training. So after the bootcamp, they will start their training, and if employer have already met and interviewed the candidates, that's where they can be entered into the registered apprenticeship program. For example, one of our employer, Ashland Companion Home Care, always interview the candidates before the training starts. While the other employers would prefer to meet and interview the participant after they finish the CNA training. So that's the second chance employer could meet with the participant and select their ideal candidates. After they complete the CNA training and obtain their CNA certificate, we do have an add-on special training in dementia care. So in that, they would learn a little bit more in terms of dementia. After the dementia care, so that's basically the end of our apprenticeship program, we do have other type of training which outside of apprenticeship program. We have the LPN training program supported by Bridges to Future. So if any of our previous apprentices or participants would like to explore a little bit more training LPN, we will be able to provide that. We're still trying to build on our registered nursing training. Right now, we do not have that particular element. So this is our healthcare pathway. Student could start with 0 experiences, then they become a certified nursing assistant, then they can become a certified dementia practitioner. Then if they want more, they could become a licensed practical nurse or a registered nurse. Yeah, currently we only have programs in the first 3 related occupation. And right now we're looking for more employer partners in certified nursing assistant, certified dementia practitioner, and licensed practical nurses. You don't have to join the apprentices program. If you want to try out with OAI first, you could become our employer partner first. Here are some questions we get asked a lot in terms of the apprenticeship program. Usually it's our program is 1 year long, but that's no difference from hiring a particular job candidate. It's just that OAI would provide additional case management, supportive services, and career coaching for around 1 year. Don already covered that part. And we do have a 90-day probation period where employers can decide whether they want to continue with apprentices or not. And in terms of the next steps, I think Don already covered that part. We'll just need to create a simple form to state that you're a partner in this program and list out the potential wage scales if the apprentices meet your pre-identified benchmarks. So that's about our programs. And I listed our contact information on the screen. Also, our director of the Southland office, Sandra Dafiago, is on the line, so she could answer any of your questions.
Thank you so much, OAI team, Don, Xiaofen, and thank you, Sandra, for being here. I'd also like to ask you to drop your email in the chat so everyone has it. Also to everyone, I will be collecting the slides from today and sending these out with the recording and with our one-pager, so you can follow up with everyone that way as well. Also, feel free to contact me if you'd like an introduction to anybody. Because we're running low on time, I'm just going to move over to Hector. Before he begins, I just want to mention that I have a very quick survey I'm going to drop in the chat. I'm interested to hear, how you enjoyed today's event, and also what other types of topics you would like to have covered at events like this in the future. So thank you again for participating. I will turn it over to Hector.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Hector Gonzalez. I am the manager for CTE Pathways at the City College of Chicago, and also supporting Career Launch Chicago, as I am in charge of the student and school recruitment. So just a little bit about Career Launch. If I can get this slide to work. There we go. So Career Launch Chicago is a collaborative effort and partnership with the City Colleges of Chicago, Chicago Public Schools, and the Community Colleges of Chicago. So we offer youth apprenticeship opportunities to high school students that connect them to their career and college pathways. Our apprentices also have the opportunity to engage in classroom learning, paid on-the-job training, mentorship, and they receive wraparound services from 1 million degrees. And so very similar to like any earn and learn, our youth apprentices also get, with on the job training, they also receive $15 an hour. And then just, a quick little thing about our components for our program, because it starts at CPS. CPS has agreed to start a youth apprenticeship course. So this course allows students to leave 2 hours early so they can travel to their work site. And they also get an honors credit. So they do get credit for leaving, and they get the credit for participating in an apprenticeship program. Our employers commit to anywhere from 1 year, 450 hours, or 2 year youth apprenticeship agreement, so the 2 years, 900 hours. Our students also continue their career and college pathway through the City Colleges of Chicago. And they have access to Career Launch Chicago financial assistance and 1 million degrees wraparound services from the beginning of the program up until the end. And then for just an example timeline of what this looks like, specifically when it comes to pharmacy tech, our rising seniors will start a summer program. It's a pre-apprenticeship program called Aim to Launch. It's the apprenticeship incubator model. And then they will be working anywhere from 10 to 16 hours a week. Once they, and that'll be for the whole year. The whole year they're working 10 to 16 hours. Upon completion of high school, The students are still enrolled in our apprenticeship program. The only difference is that their hours will increase from anywhere to 20 to 25 hours a week. Once they register in the city colleges in the fall, and in this case, it's pharmacy tech, so they'll be registered at Malcolm X. They continue to work their 20 to 25 hours a week apprenticeship program, and then they get enrolled into their higher ed courses. And some of those courses that I have highlighted here is the timeline of what it'll take for them to become a pharmacy technician. So we already described all the classes that they'll need, and this is the actual sequence that they'll be taking it on, that they'll be registered for. And then one thing that I forgot to mention, even prior to them enrolling to the city colleges, is that our students are being graded. So it is a graded course. And so our employer partners are also sharing their work process schedules with us. So that way we know the student competencies, and that way our students are actually getting graded. And so this is, again, because it's a partnership with Chicago Public Schools. They work closely with the teacher of record that sits in the downtown office at CPS. And so, just a quick highlight of what the coursework could look like. So it's a year and a half program. The last half a year of their program at the city colleges, that's where they have like their clinical practicum. So that by the time they have their clinical practicum, students will not be able to work the apprenticeship program because they'll be doing their practicum at that, because you can't get both. And because we are focusing on pharmacy tech, I do want to highlight that, we are partnering up with Northwestern, who I saw is on the call, CVS Health. They came on as a 1-year youth apprenticeship, Northwestern Medicine as a 2-year apprenticeship, but we also have Lurie's Children's Hospital and Rush Medical. The very unique thing about Lurie's is that we have a construction and design 1-year youth apprenticeship program with them. And with Rush, we have a 1-year youth apprenticeship in IT. And what I like is that both of them have to do with like the medical field. And so, as we know, we have some amazing partners here. Just want to throw it out there as well. If you guys are interested in pursuing some sort of youth apprenticeship programs with Career Launch, please feel free to contact us. I'll put it contact in the chat, as well as this deck will go out. So Stephanie Gomez, who's the director of Career Launch Chicago, any questions with partnerships, definitely contact her. And I'm school and student facing, and so that's me. So if you have any questions, please feel free to shoot us an email. And I'm sorry for going so fast, but in the sake of time, I want to be sure that we get through everything. So thank you.
I appreciate you, Hector. Before we hear from Priscilla, from Suhi, very quickly, does anyone have a question for Hector or for the OEI team? Okay, and we will send out all that information. Hector, I encourage you to put your email in the chat too. Priscilla, if you want to introduce us to your behavioral health apprenticeship model, go ahead.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Let me get this up and running. All right, view slideshow. Well, I have more time than I thought now, so that's kind of nice. Just to preface my presentation, I think now that you guys are familiar with the apprenticeship model, you've seen some examples of people implementing models. My presentation is a lot more about proposing an idea for a future apprenticeship to see, if you guys would be interested in something like this, if you see value in something like this. And so to give you a little bit of background information, I'm working on a project that started really from a report by JPMorgan Chase called Growing Skills for a Growing Chicago, where they're trying to invest in programs to boost economic mobility for low-income Chicagoans. And so Sinai Urban Health Institute identified a need in the Latinx community. And so that's where we came up with the Population Health Career Pathways pilot. And so quickly, the goal of that pilot is to expand career opportunities for Latinx job seekers with a high school diploma, and then simultaneously expand bilingual and culturally competent healthcare workforce. These are some of the outcomes of that project, of what we hope this project will fulfill. And so what we've done thus far is to convene an advisory committee to really help inform the development of the program. We started by defining population health. We started by defining, what are population health careers that this target population of Latinx job seekers with a high school diploma. So those entry-level careers, what are they, right? And the advisory committee, I don't know if you remember, April sits on this committee. We brainstormed a bunch of different job titles. They almost all fell under the community health worker umbrella. And so we decided to create 3 different tracks of specialization training. health education, the traditional one, a more administrative one in this medium shade blue. And the most innovative piece of the project is a community health worker that's specialized in behavioral health. And so it's been fuzzy. We've been trying to, like the title of this presentation, conceptualize what that is and really wrap our head around what does a CHW that's specialized in behavioral health need to be trained on, and what are the responsibilities. And so NAMI Illinois, the National Alliance for Mental Illness, actually invited us a couple weeks ago to present this concept at their conference. And we had the opportunity to discuss this with Dr. Donnell Barnett, who is a Deputy Director for Mental Health Operations at IDHS. And so it was really encouraging because he is currently working on a certification called Mental Health Professional. And if you guys are familiar with this field, peer support specialists, they fall under that mental health professional, and you have to be certified to get that to have that job, right? And so he is basically trying to open up that opportunity for other people, because for a peer support specialist, you need to have lived experience. And so he's professionalizing that. He's looking to create a certification, and it's helping us because we're investing in these entry-level roles, or we're trying to at least. This is a quote from Brent Kahn, who is a project director at the Behavioral Health Education Center in Nebraska, and Illinois is actually basing their mental health center on the Nebraska model. And basically he's saying that community health workers do have a role, that legislation is supporting community health workers with certification and billing through Medicaid. There's also an increased investment in behavioral health workforce development. And so it's demonstrating that there's going to be a push for CHWs in the behavioral health sector. So how much time? No more time. So basically right now we're working on piloting a curriculum for this training. We have a curriculum already laid out. So phase 1 is to recruit at least 10 participants into this specialization track to test out the curriculum that we're developing. Phase 2 would be creating an apprenticeship model, mostly because this role isn't existing. I don't know if you guys have CHWs working in your behavioral health department, but it's very rare to find. So we're kind of advocating for the role within the behavioral health field. And this is just an example of what that could look like. We haven't listed out in much more detail this on-the-job learning. These are just the 6 domains generally. And then some certifications that would fall under that apprenticeship would be mental health first aid, the one that's being currently developed at the state level, and Narcan training and CPR training. Oh my gosh, so fast. So yeah, so I'm looking to see, if people are interested in exploring this concept or this idea. There are other initiatives that are happening where they're starting to push for CHWs in behavioral health. Yeah, thank you guys.
Thanks, Priscilla. I wonder if anyone on the call wants to give Priscilla feedback on that. Is anyone interested in exploring these apprenticeship models as an employer? Are the employers on the call, are you in need of behavioral health workers? Do you know what your demand is for behavioral health?
And it's a really new concept. Dr. Barnett was explaining that right now mental health it's usually one patient, one provider. And so he's trying to look beyond that and make it more of a care team approach, especially because nurses or community health workers can address comorbidities as well. And so that's the state level direction.
I think, if I may, so back when I was actually working in high schools, specifically at John Hancock College Prep, this is something that we prepared our parents for, more into like youth mental health first aid.
Mhm.
But then we also had some of our staff members trained in mental health first aid, just because we found it very important when we talked about wraparound services and having our parents and staff members understand what mental health is, right? And so for me, like, I think it'd be a great opportunity to maybe somehow plug in CPS, because this is some of the work that we've been doing, at least underground, when I used to work at John Hancock. And I know it was a school's choice, but I can see this also working in other schools in CPS.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Well, Priscilla, I'm sure we'd all like to hear from you once you get a little further along, and open up the space again. But thank you all for being here. I hope you take the time to fill out that very brief survey. I will send out everyone's slides afterwards so you can have those and follow up. I hope you make connections today. I hope everyone has learned a little bit. I want to thank again our presenters, Jake and Megan and Kindy, and the OAI team, and Hector and Priscilla. Thank you so much. Much appreciated. Everyone have a great rest of your Tuesday and a great week. And I'll see you at our next CHWC event. Thank you so much.
I have a great one.